Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown, where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness, where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I'm Willie Hassell, along with the
and
lovely...
I am not.
No, you're not. You're the lovely, the mystical, the mysterious.
You forgot my name again?
Lynn Nickerson, right?
Hi, Willie.
Hi, how are you?
Happy Halloween.
Yes, happy Halloween to you.
Thank you, thank you.
Happy Halloween to everybody.
That's right, to everybody out there in Radio Land.
Yeah, this is the best holiday of the year.
It's one of the nicest. There are several very nice holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
as I'm concerned, this is the best one.
How are we going to get our little Halloween lit house into the camera behind us? Think that's going to work?
Over there somewhere.
Over here?
Yeah, right over there.
Oh, how about right up there? So they can see it on the...
I don't think that'll show.
Oh, okay.
The only reason it matters for those people who are wondering is...
we do videotape.
Yeah, we are videotaping for YouTube. So when it hits the YouTube, then you'll see the cute... Yeah, that's good.
What do you think? Think that'll catch it?
Yeah, that should be perfect. So, hey, we got a guest tonight. Shall we introduce him?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, tonight on Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. This week, we welcome to the show Jim Perry. This is Jim's first visit to Spirit Radio, and we are very happy to have him. Jim is the host of the Euphomet podcast, an esoteric podcast dealing with real stories from real people and their encounters with the unknown and the supernatural. Jim has climbed Red Rock Mountains in Arizona in search of a portal. He has interviewed a haunted statue and had lunch with vampires. And I believe on the haunted statue, he actually got EVPs from it, too. I got to hear about that one.
Oh, that was the haunted object?
It must be.
Okay.
So nothing is too strange for Jim.
Willie?
I lost my place. To experience himself and share with his listeners as he shadows the paranormal for an on-the-screen point of view. So let's welcome to Spirit Radio, Jim Perry. Good evening, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
What a fantastic treat for Halloween in general. It's great
True.
to talk to you guys.
Isn't that neat? Yeah, it's actually the 31st of October.
That's right.
The parting of the veil.
So we're happy to have you on, Jim, and it's great having you here. We're glad you can make it.
Very appropriate.
Thank you so much. I'm actually aboard right now. I'm talking to you from the Queen Mary.
No kidding.
Oh, really?
Out in Long Beach.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I'm on sort of the A level outside of my port windows. is actually some sort of super insane Halloween party going on. In fact, right as you introduced me and brought me onto air, I saw a pier of fire just completely engulf my window. So there's a lot of craziness going on out there.
Ew,
I apologize if it's
be careful.
a little loud. But yeah, just this is a fully immersive experience right now as you guys caught me on sort of one of my episode tapings.
Okay, so it's like, 8 o'clock there? 8 after 8 or something?
A little bit after 7 for me, yeah.
Oh, after 7, all right. Oh, that's right. Is it this week? This weekend we turn the clocks back. That's what it is. Okay.
Yep, this coming weekend, yep.
Why are you on the Queen Mary? Are you in like a room by yourself? How are you doing this?
You know, it's really funny. Actually, my producer, Tyler Carey, him and I work essentially hand in hand with the post-production and some of the conception of the show. He's actually with me now, so that's really great. I actually have a cabin mate to be on a haunted vessel with. And we're actually here not so much to investigate, you know, sort of the anomalous and the unknown with the ship itself, but with its resident illusionist, this man named Aidan Sinclair. Now he had been the resident illusionist for the Stanley Hotel previously.
Oh.
Just recently, he began that duty here on the boat, and you know has a very interesting life story, has a very interesting relationship with the paranormal, and so we're here to kind of actually just shadow him and take in the rest of this by chance.
Oh, so you're going to have him for one of your podcast segments?
Yeah.
Oh, good idea.
You know, what better place to be on Halloween?
Oh, yeah.
You know, than come to the Queen Mary for it. So
truly.
Yeah, really. I've never been on the Queen Mary. I've seen it. I've been by it. Lynn's been on there.
Yeah, I didn't get too many vibes. I didn't like the pool area, but that was about it.
A little radio.
Yeah, very interesting.
A little radio studio here is haunted, if that means anything.
Oh my God.
It's not quite the same.
To come visit sometime.
You're certainly welcome to. Which brings me to one of my questions I wanted to ask you tonight. You have a wonderful concept for your show. And I love the idea that you do record everything. I mean, you travel around and you interview these people with some of the strangest stories. I think that it would, you know, Willie and I discussed this. It would make a great TV show. Of course, it would be a lot more expensive and, you know, a whole lot more, bigger crew, more equipment. But it's a wonderful concept, and I think it works very well for radio.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, it was very important for me to integrate a lot of the type of radio that I love and a lot of the type of film and cinema influences that I have. It just happens that podcasting is just such the perfect platform right now.
It is. It's a perfect platform.
Very intimate stories.
Yes.
You know, because as you guys know, for as long as you've been doing this, you can build a relationship up with your listeners like no other. There's something so intimate about audio.
Yeah, it's very true. And you can do other things while you're listening, too, which is nice. You're not nailed to a TV set. Well, I guess people aren't anymore anyway. But another thing, too, Jim, I love the selection of the music. Who's in charge of the music?
That's something that Tyler and I work on pretty much hand in hand. We work with a group of composers that a lot of them are actually out of Sweden. But I think a lot of our production choices come down to movies that we've seen, albums that we've listened to, books that we've read. I think that we think visually when we put the show together. We try to always think about how can we really convey these visuals that we have in our head, or this tone that we have, or this emotion. How can we really convey that best with music and texture and sound effects and everything else? And you know, we're really lucky that we can be a little bit scrappy, and we're out here on the ground, and we're doing these things in person. And so it allows us to kind of live through that process. And so being in these spaces, in the exact places of our guests and our featured people, like, we're just able to essentially suck up all of that and then try to figure out a way to convey it the best we can.
Well, it works well.
It does. The great selection of music.
Great. So you travel all over the country, do you?
I do, yeah. I have been. I mean, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I guess I've been to around 13 or 14, 15 locations over the last, over the last 4 months. Maybe.
Wow.
So, my wife would be the first one to tell you that I'm not home very often right now. And I think that's a good thing and bad thing. I don't know. We've been together for a long time, so who's to judge? But it is a very central part to why the format of the show I think is resonating with people, and I really first off, I really appreciate the kind words that you guys have said. I take a lot of pride in this idea of trying to go and immerse myself and challenge myself and really place the listener in my shoes. I don't want to make the shows about me. They're always about my subjects. They're always about the places I go to and what's happening. But I do want to just be there enough to essentially kind of be the sounding board for what I think the listener may feel when they're experiencing some of this stuff.
Well, that carries through very well. You're successful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think your approach is really enhances what's happening there.
So where do you call home? Is it New York? Is that right?
My home base is actually the Oregon coast.
Oregon?
Okay.
Oh.
For some reason...
I lived in Seattle for about a decade, and most recently, my wife and I moved back there. That's the place I was raised, where she was raised. So it's kind of like coming home, There's a lot of convenience and ease. And listen, the Pacific Northwest in general is a huge influence on the work I do, I think. When you're trying to get yourself in the mood to work on paranormal topics or trying to investigate some sort of fringe paranormal activity, when you look outside your window and there's essentially no color but blue, and there's haze around the mountains, and it's been raining buckets, it's kind of easy to get into that mind space.
Yeah, but aren't there a lot of suicides in Seattle? Doesn't that have a high suicide rate?
Yeah, that and serial killers.
Oh.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I can see why. The rain can be very depressing. Yeah, and it is conducive to spooky stuff.
But at least it's not snow.
Yeah, that's true. No snow.
Snow's a different story. Snow's one of the things that in the Northwest, if it happens, then it's Armageddon. No one can deal with snow here at all.
Yeah, I was out there in Washington State. I forget the name of the town one time, and they had a blizzard, and I was snowbound there. I couldn't go anywhere for about 4 days.
Nobody plowed. Was that it?
No, it was terrible.
Wow. I'm glad I'm not there. But anyway, I wanted to get into some of your episodes. Do you mind chatting about that a bit, Jim?
Oh, yeah. I'm open
good.
book, for sure.
Okay. Well, I loved all of them. And some of them were personally quite meaningful to me. I just finished tonight listening to Lives with John, and I don't know if it's E.L. Train. I couldn't quite get his last name. He's the one, weirdlectures.com.
Yeah, John E.L. Tenney.
E.L. Tane, is that it? Okay. It would be a French name? French family name?
Yeah, John E.L. Tenney is his name.
Okay. What he concluded at the end of that is really quite profound. Do you want to talk a little bit about his death experience?
Yeah, I can. Listen, I think that there's a lot of interpretation out there for perhaps what it's like to pass on to the other side. You have a lot of stories, whether they're be anecdotal or, maybe backed up by some obscure scientific study done in some decade long ago. I've seen a tunnel of light, these kind of things.
Yeah, that's the typical experience, true.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, my grandma appeared and took my hand. So there's these sort of things. And what John saw was not that. And what John saw was essentially nothingness.
Nothingness.
And in infamy.
He was just an idea, and he knew it.
Yeah, and so
an infinite idea.
So try to wrap your head around that.
I know. And all of the nothingness that entails. I was getting depressed listening to him talking about this. It was like he was something in a vacuum that would last forever and forever, and it was almost like a death sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, and to think about that as being a possibility, I think really shatters a lot of our core idealism that we carry. Whether he... I think in the Western culture, I think a lot of people would agree that whether someone is a practicing Christian or not, essentially our society, our popular belief system is based off Christianity. Whether you're an atheist or not, our moral codes, our ideas of right and wrong, these things are all influenced by that. So I think when we have this idea of something as popular as dying and then going into a nothingness that is happening to you while you're conscious of it almost.
Yeah.
His representation of it is not something that is, and I'm sorry if we're giving people panic attacks right now while they're listening to this over the radio, because this is very kind of heavy stuff. You want to talk about darkness, you want to talk about brooding material. This is kind of it. But I think, I think through that, it was only one. This is maybe my opinion or interpretation of that. Mm-hmm. Is that whatever it was, that experience helped John become a better person.
You're right.
That experience, it woke him up to something else. When John died, he was a self-professed, butthead teen kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Ego.
Didn't care about anything. Go ahead, Lynn.
I said ego. He was just very self-centered.
Yeah. So, was this perhaps a way for the universe to maybe shake him up a bit and say, listen, dude, you're not listening to anybody else. Well, maybe you're going to listen to this because maybe you have some stuff you need to do in life.
He mentioned shock, and that's exactly what it was. He was given a real shock. He had one choice, to stay the way he was or be everything, and he chose everything. And I know it's kind of hard for everybody listening to put this in context, because this kid died, and he didn't see the tunnel of light. He didn't see Grandma and Grandpa greeting him. He just felt this nothingness where he was the only thing that was there. He was an idea, and he was infinite, and there was just nothing else there. It was like a big void. There was no emotion, there was nothingness. And then there was an idea outside of himself that suggested, do you want this? Or do you want to experience everything? And he chose the second one. And then he came back to life. The EMTs shocked him back into life. And his soul was shocked back into a different kind of an awareness. That's what he needed.
So do you think he was shown it that way rather than the tunnel of light because of the way that he had lived his life up until then?
I do. I have heard other stories of some prisoners dying, and then they wind up in this hellish place, and they're scared to death, and then they wake up and they realize the wrongness, the wrong direction of their ways. Everybody can experience it differently. And I think that trip was designed for him to shock him that there's so much more in life than what he was experiencing or giving of himself.
If you don't straighten out, this is where you're going to end up.
Yeah, this is what's going to happen to you. You're not going to like it because it's forever.
That's a long time.
That was a very brave story for him to tell. And I think he's really turned into quite an interesting person. How did you get a hold of him? How did you become aware of his story?
So, John was someone that in the first incarnation of Euphomet, which was a little bit more of a straight-up interview conversation show. I had John on the show at that point. I was aware of some of his work. But most recently, I hooked up with John through mutual friends, through Greg and Dana Newkirk.
Oh, for them, okay.
Fantastic, curators of paranormal material.
I'd like to talk about them too. But go ahead.
Yeah, we got hooked up through them. John has this position within a lot of our lives for myself and a group of my friends to kind of be a little bit of a mentor to us. I don't want to say too much because I don't want John to Greg always warns me about giving John a big head about these kind of things. But listen, but John's a little bit older than us. He's kind of seen and been through everything that you could think of in terms of the business side of this stuff. Because there is that, right? Like every one of us are doing this. We're producing content. There's a whole other side to the curtain. And John's experienced all that. So on top of that, John has experienced a tremendous amount of other paranormal activity, very intense activity and phenomenon. So when some of us are feeling a little spun out, John's kind of the first guy we call,
Oh, that's
say,
cool.
Man, what?
Use him as a reference.
It was a pleasure to talk with him in that regard.
Yeah, that was very cool. For those who don't know, Jim goes to various locations with different people, interviewing them and talking about their craft or their opinion on the paranormal or their experience of living or dealing with the paranormal or the supernatural. So there's a variety of things on these different podcasts, and they're all fascinating. They're really fascinating. Okay, how about Greg and Dana Newkirk?
Well, Greg and Dana Newkirk have become really good friends of mine. I admire their work so much. They have attracted and curated a collection of not only just fans of what their work, but essentially artifacts that are almost like seemingly mystically attracted to them. They find their way, these artifacts that are seemingly or allegedly have some sort of haunting to them, carry some form of energy. Greg and Dana essentially where people drop those off, right? They say, listen, here's this piece of furniture, right? This piece of furniture has this story, and we don't know what to do with it. We can't take responsibility for it. So it's at that point, Greg and Dana, they really try to get to the bottom of what is really going on. What reaction could this be? If spirit energies, if ghosts, if all these things are real, or if at least this phenomenon is really having an effect on us as people and as entities, then what steps can we take to maybe satisfy what some of the needs are? I think their perspective on spirits, on ghosts, would be that there is kind of a solvable equation in some regards when you find what that thing really wants. And so what's interesting about these two is they have the traveling museum of the paranormal and the occult. And folks can check it out online. They have a ton of great content. They're constantly going on adventures. One of the things that constantly inspires me is the amount of adventures they are going on.
Yeah, truly.
I've been very lucky enough to feature them in a couple episodes of mine. Some unreleased episodes will be coming out soon where Greg goes on the road with me as well. And so I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in very damp, very dark wooded areas with these two.
Wow.
And they're doing fantastic work.
Okay, how about one of the haunted objects then that they had? Was there a mention of a statue? You mentioned a statue, Willie?
Was that one of those?
Yeah, are you talking about Billy? Billy the Idol?
Billy, yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you want to mention that? It is kind of a long, involved story. Do you have a shorter haunted object story? We've got about 4 more minutes to the bottom of the hour.
Yeah, let me explain Billy real quick. I
can
do it in 4. Okay. I think I can do it in 4 minutes. Billy essentially was, like many of their objects, donated to them by a certain group of people who had felt anger, had felt bad vibes. Different events would happen around the statue in terms of synchronicities or different energies that would lead someone to believe this was haunted. Greg and Dana got possession of it. They started doing experiments basically right from the start with some EVPs, etc. They heard this thing screaming. They heard this thing screaming through EVP. It was angry. It didn't know what was going on. So through a process of time and building trust, they actually developed a really deep relationship with the statue. They developed a relationship as to where they would ask it questions, or they would gain information or insight from it, not just through EVP, but Greg started developing a relationship and getting information through the dream state. Mm-hmm. And this relationship continued to grow until Billy essentially amassed a fan base of folks that would come, leave it offerings, treats, they would build an altar. And what was discovered is that Billy is a facsimile, or maybe the real thing, a Nikisi statue. And the Nikisi statue was essentially used by the shamans of this particular African tribe as like sort of a spirit divination device, or a mediumship, or a sense of power, someone leading someone through. And this Nikisi would choose who its bearer was going to be. And it chose Greg through dreams. And so right now they still have this relationship where Greg is gaining insight because the statue has built this trust and this love for Greg and Dana. And now it's giving it more and more information. So now we're all just kind of standing back and at awe of this relationship. And maybe after the break, I can tell you a little bit about my conversation that I had with Billy, the idol.
Whoa. That would be great. I have to ask, an African idol statue named Billy, where did they come up with the name?
Oh.
Was it Billy Idol?
It was. The original name for it was the Idol of Nightmares. That's how hellish this thing was. That's how angry it seemed to be. And so as they started developing this relationship, the Idol of Nightmares didn't quite fit anymore. It seemed like almost derogatory, like not something you call your friend necessarily. So Billy was thrown on there. Billy the Idol, after all of our favorite, bleach blonde, spiked-haired leather jacket
That's
stuff.
Funny.
Okay, that's what I kind of guessed, yeah.
Jim, I've got to ask you, before I ask you, let me tell you something. I was once given a gift of an African statue, and it was like carved out of, I think it was black wood. It might have been ebony. It was long and narrow, and it was a male, and it was almost like, not quite an effigy, but it looked purposeful to me, and if it was African. So what did this Billy statue look like?
Very much like what you described.
It was black, and it had like a square head on it, a square hat on its head, sort of.
Billy has like sort of all sorts of ornate details. In fact, he has essentially, he might even have ivory
inlaid.
And inlays
okay.
within him. So he's essentially he's not. You'll also see Nkisis that are more visceral in representation. These will have nails in them. These will be a little bit more crudely formed. Oh. And whoever had crafted Billy had done so with a level of craftsmanship that was of sort of utmost pristine quality. And so if folks actually go to paramuseum.com, I believe is the URL, I think on the front page there's probably some pictures of Billy. And it's really something to be seen. I think that with the name Billy, or with the name Idol of Nightmares, you see him one way, but with his name Billy the Idol, you really see him in a different light, because it's a really beautiful, wonderful statue.
And carved, right? It's carved.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So we are at the bottom of the hour, and we're going to take a break. We're talking to Jim Perry. His podcast is Euphomet, and we'll be right back, so don't go away.
The place we lived when we were young, in a world of magnets and miracles. Our thoughts strayed constantly and without boundary. The ringing of the division bell had begun. ragged band that followed in our footsteps, running before time took our dreams away, leaving the myriad small creatures trying to tie us to the ground, to a life consumed by slow decay. The grass was greener, the light was brighter, with friends around us.
Hey, you are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, and tonight our guest is Jim Perry. Welcome back, Jim.
Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we were talking about Billy and what he looks like. Now, you did mention that there were nails in him.
So there's not actually nails in Billy, but there are other NKCs that most typically you will see nails applied to them.
Oh. I thought they were more sacred, so what would be the purpose of the nails? Or would that be for black magic?
It's really interesting. I think there's a lot of ideas about what those nails could be, and a lot of those I'm not so sure. I really don't want to comment and speak about it because I'm not really an expert in that field. But I will tell you that our popular conception about what nails represent in other cultures, and especially applied to things like voodoo dolls, for example, are kind of way off base.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah.
It could be that, maybe because of the iron, there's a different kind of a connotation. Maybe it has something to do with the strength or blood or something. It might not be evil and hurt. It might be completely different. Okay, so let's get down to what Billy's purpose really is.
So what's Billy's purpose really is essentially this is an object that a spirit inhabits. That's kind of why these things are built. Mm-hmm. They're based in the Congo, right? And you're looking at essentially. Let me say it this way. It's interesting because Greg and Dana will be given or find objects such as a plank of wood in some house that the Warrens investigated, in the 70s or something. And of course, like that's loaded in some way, right? And that has its own story and its own narrative and its own ability to perhaps have some sort of haunting in it. But when we're talking about like statues and artifacts, essentially that even anthropologically have such a greater significance in terms of their cultural relevance. Mm-hmm. You're talking about nearly a millennia of lore and myth and story. That how do you cut through some of that? How do you interpret and respect and give out that information? It's one of the reasons when I talk about these guys, I really do. I encourage people to first also listen to the Euphomet episodes they're on, which I think is 8 and 9. But also check out their museum and check out their work, because one of the big responsibilities they have is to really represent this information fairly.
Yes.
Because what happens in the paranormal and what happens, I think, especially with objects, is that sometimes these objects there can be energy placed into them based off misinformation, if that makes sense. That's
right. Yeah, misunderstood.
There can be a negativity applied to some of these things based off a preconceived notion or a fear or a misunderstanding that then shades or empowers something in completely the wrong way. And there's a lot of folks out there dealing in this world, these artifacts, etc., that are not taking the responsibility of actually trying to tell the real stories. And they're actually trying to essentially not add more hyperbole, not add more myth to what is actually going on here, and not to add more negative energy to something where it doesn't belong.
What is really important is understanding the intent involved with the object. Some objects are imbued with just energy, and some have more of a cultural significance, almost spiritual, and they could actually be not possessed, but in possession of a spirit. and have a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And I think when looking at objects not as just, well, that's spooky or haunted, but with a more strategic eye, a more empathetic eye, and one that has a very contextual response to what really could be happening, I think is exactly what's needed. And I think that's the real work. And I think that's what those two do better than a lot of people, for sure.
Mm. So to let the audience in on what Billy is all about, how is it that Greg is communicating with it, and what is coming about?
So what's really interesting is that Greg started to have dreams, and he started to have dreams with a small man that essentially kind of looked like Billy a little bit. That if this man could have a statue made of him that kind of looked like him, and so he had these dreams. He details them in the Euphomet episode, but he started to have this occurrence of certain insight being lent to him by this small man. And he came to the discovery, he came to the realization at some point that, oh my gosh, this could be Billy. This could be Billy talking to me. Now, when he also discovered the fact that within Hassell, these things are imbued with a spirit, and that these spirits then have to choose someone to sort of be their handler, for lack of better words, for someone to be their physical representation and to carry out perhaps their spiritual work. Well, what has started to happen, and I can only share so much, but what has started to happen is that Billy has started to give Greg blueprints for building things, for constructing certain things, for creating certain things. And I can't share any more about what that may be or what the results could be, but it is now, I think, a relationship that is fruitful for perhaps both parties, and I think that whatever ends up in that regard, are we seeing something play out in 2018, almost 2019? Are we seeing something play out that is reaching back in time to give us a glimpse of what ancient traditions, how their inner exchange of information with the other side, how that played out? And I think it's just fascinating to watch.
When do you suppose we would have an idea of what this would be about, the blueprints and so forth? Might it be revealed later or somewhere else, like on the internet?
It's really interesting. I think that they have information and some content available through their Patreon page for people. And I didn't mean to set it up like that in terms of it sounds like a sales pitch to go see their paywall. But it's interesting. These folks, this couple, they're so busy with creating content. I was with them recently, and they go, "Oh my gosh, we haven't posted any free content in almost a year. Like we're a year ahead of time." And these narratives, these stories that we've been sharing, the update on, we've only given them to our Patreon, like our museum members. And, them saying like, oh, maybe we should like put up a few things that are a little bit more recent. But I guess the thing that shows you is that, in this day and age, you can develop a very committed fan base that doesn't have to be gigantic, not to say that their fan base isn't big, but you can build up a fan base and have a sort of an A-B relationship without having to go through the hoops of publishing certain papers or getting into press releases and even doing a lot of media, because they're there and you're already communicating. So it's very interesting, but I do think if people find them on Patreon, they'll be able to essentially kind of get up to date on what their projects are and what some of the results are.
Okay, good. I'd like to check that out. How about now, I wanted to talk at least about one other set of haunted objects that they had. I also wanted to touch on some other things too, Jim. But the dolls, what about the service dolls. Do you recall about that? They were youth services.
Yeah, I do.
Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. And I'll be transparent with you too. The stuff with the service dolls, I was almost tempted not to include.
Really?
The show, just because, and it's interesting, and I'm kind of thinking out loud right now. This is not a kind of a pre-rehearsed statement. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, so this is very from the mouth of babes here. But there was something so visceral, something so tragic and real about the idea of these dolls essentially inheriting the pain of those folks that use them. Let me explain a little bit. So essentially, Greg and Dana, they took me to a chest. And in this chest, with a lock, mind you.
With a lock.
They opened it up and revealed these two frizzy, kind of human-looking dolls.
That are anatomically
very friendly
correct.
Looking,
yep.
But kind of classically almost creepy because of their deterioration in their age, right? And they said a lot, these were brought to us. These were used by institutions to be put in front of children that suffered some sort of physical abuse. And these are the dolls that they set in front of children and said, where did they touch you? What happened? And communicate in a way. Now,
right.
That issue for a period of time, I know is very complex, and a lot of folks that deal with sort of the legal issues regarding how things were even investigated for a period of time will say that, perhaps some of that was, for a period of time, hysteria, right? But that being said, I just wanted to put that there for people that argue that, well, that was a hysteria, da-da-da. But it almost doesn't matter, because what had happened, what seemingly happened in the situation, is that those dolls worked as a memory and almost in a symbiotic process, stored essentially the trauma of these stories that these children were sharing. Now, what's interesting is whether these stories were 100% accurate, whether some of these cases were influenced or not, it almost doesn't matter, because that energy of that exchange between them pointing out certain things, talking about trauma and voicing these and manifesting them, had seemingly loaded these dolls with that tragedy and trauma. And so for Greg and Dana, having those dolls under lock and key, keeping them in a room far away from where they usually are, I think really symbolizes the power that those have. Statues like Billy, he's out in the front room, right?
Yep.
Like the plank from the Ed and Lorraine Warren investigation, Amityville. It's in the kitchen next to some old Fate magazines, right? These dolls were not.
Well, how were they manifesting energy? I mean, how was it that they knew that they were haunted or full of energy? How was it manifesting?
I don't remember that. I don't remember exactly what the phenomenon was associated with these dolls and exactly what they were perpetrating.
Yeah.
I do know that, listen, I will say this, that with any of their objects, they go through a process of having a lot of stuff submitted to them. They go through a process of a lot of people coming forward and saying, well, here's a Polaroid of this haunted fishing pole that my grandpa gave me. And then going, what is the story behind this? Why could this be a thing? And more often than not, there is nothing to it. It is postulation. You know what I mean? So whatever that phenomenon was in regards to what those dolls could have been a part of, and I'm sorry, I don't remember if maybe we mentioned that or not.
Yeah, I don't believe you mentioned it
in the show.
Yeah.
So for whatever it was, it probably to me wasn't I don't know, as strong of an anecdotal experience as the reason why they were there. It's probably why I didn't even choose to put it in there or to say what those was, because or those were, and frankly, in some cases, they don't even need to have experiences to be dropped off to people like Greg and Dana.
Yeah.
They could be
just
sitting
the
in
feeling.
somebody's attic.
Yeah.
And they could feel a guilt about it. They could feel why do I need these here? Like, they don't feel good. I have them in my garage, and every time I park next to them, they make my skin crawl. So there's a lot of that too.
Yeah, they could just be that.
People are just kind of empathetic, and
or they just might change position, and people will notice them walking around the garage or something like that. I was just curious as to how it manifested. Do you remember the story about the vortex jumper, Peter Gersten?
Oh, very well.
I know him. I met him while I was out there. I was there for 9.5 years. And let me just preface this with, I lived right there in the village of Oak Creek, and I had several UFO experiences while I was there. But when I first moved there, people said to me, oh, UFOs land on Bell Rock. And I thought, oh, yeah, this is just the New Age crap going on. And that really went in one ear and out the other. I believe in UFOs, but there's just all this New Age hype. So after I'd been there for a while, I started having some experiences. And my condo was exactly a mile away. And it was determined by this investigator. His name is Tom Dongo, originally from Maine, but he's been out there for about 30 years now, investigating all kinds of weird, high strangeness activity, particularly connected with UFOs. So he's written 7 books, and in it he claims that whole area, including the Bell Rock area, it's about a 10-mile area, that it's sort of like a portal. The whole thing is a portal that I think it opens and closes. So I think that a portal opening up on Bell Rock is highly possible. And I was wondering why Peter thought that it would just be on a certain day, like 11/11 of 12. Actually, 12/21 of 2012, wasn't that one of his dates?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you go to the top of Bell Rock with him, the very top?
I did not make it to the very top of the Bell Rock.
I didn't either. I never got that high.
That makes me feel good, because
I didn't either.
Yeah, good. All right, we're in good company.
That's right.
Yeah, listen, that's a real challenging
hike.
Rock.
Yes, it is. And you really have to be a rock climber to go up that last third of the rock.
Exactly. That's the thing, is completely unprepared for that.
Yeah.
I'm a creative director. I'm a producer. I'm not exactly a rock climber. I climb, in the cracks and grooves with just my hands and feet. So it was a shock. Thankfully, I had an assistant producer there with me, Chelsea. Mm-hmm. They made it to the top, and
wow.
I sent the recorder along and got some great tape in that regard. But a lot of our conversation, a lot of our interaction happened back at Peter's apartment. Had us over. Peter was a sweet man. He was so generous with his story, so transparent with things that have gone on in his life, and was so clear and precise with what his beliefs were. Mm-hmm. Now, what you can't mistake is that Peter is all in. And I think he wouldn't argue. Peter's all in. And Peter has a notion. He has a strong, firm belief in what the nature of reality is and what his place is in it. So Peter is most known for being the UFO attorney,
right,
the UFO lawyer. And, in the 70s and 80s, he worked with top UFO investigators. He was the first one to sue the federal government for information on UFOs. Mm-hmm. And so he went deep and he went hard on all of this UFO material. Well, what happened during that time is, it's funny. If anybody used to listen to Art Bell and they used to listen to Peter's appearances on there, if you listen to Peter in 1995, 1996, and then you start listening to him in the early 2000s, you go, okay, what happened here? Because a new Peter started to emerge. And this Peter that started to emerge was one that synchronicities began to occur in his life. And I think you agree, we all feel these coincidences these beyond belief coincidences that are seemingly synchronicities that, when followed, a lot of times, more often than not, they actually lead to more synchronicities. It's like you start playing this game and it keeps telling you come back, and now the game is on. Well, Peter took that seemingly as a challenge and said, okay, well, we're going to game then. And Peter began to experience these synchronicities that started to tell him and give him information and insight through number sequences, through messages appearing in different papers and different even physical activities that happened to his life that started to put an emphasis on 1111, started putting emphasis on numbers that were synchronistic with 1111, and at the same time being drawn and being informed that he needed to be in Sedona and that he needed to be on Bell Rock, and that at Bell Rock there would be a vortex, there would be a portal there. Now, in that portal, and this is something we didn't cover on the show, but in that portal, Peter believes that's the access point where one can find a virus.
A virus?
A virus on the other side. A virus. And a virus on the other side of this portal, if eliminated, would essentially, at that point, help raise our collective consciousness. So this virus that's affecting our simulated universe that Peter believes in is there and is essentially responsible for the biggest plights of the world right now. And you can name it, like whatever that is. It's global warming, it's it's more, this virus is responsible for infecting our simulated universe right now. So essentially Peter got to this point in time where the numbers were pointing towards a specific date. This specific date, 12/21/2012, would be when the portal opened for him. Now, he was supposed to, in addition to being on top at that time, he was supposed to have a certain amount of people that he took to Bell Rock to be numerically synchronistic with that date.
What was it, 1,100 people?
1,111
people, yeah. Do you think that was really necessary to make that happen? He believed it.
He's not one to judge, I mean, I think that, listen, I think when you have someone as committed to Peter to an idea, you start questioning really quick about sort of how valid your beliefs are in representation or reflection of what he believes. You know what I mean? Like, I can't, I wouldn't be able to answer if I think getting 1,111 people during that day, if it would have opened the portal or not, because to say yes or no, it would mean that I am engaging with this idea, which is so otherworldly, that I don't even know what to believe about it. And not to discredit Peter, I'm just saying that it's not contrary to what my beliefs would be, but I also believe that I don't know what I believe, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes perfect sense because there's supposed to be portals in that whole area. And I didn't know that there would be anything necessarily in particular that would trigger the opening of one. When I had my experience in January of 2003, absolutely nothing triggered this dream of a huge mothership coming to the village of Oak Creek. So I'm just kind of curious as to what he was basing that particular event on, because it seemed like so many different points had to come together in order for this portal to open. And I just find that they seem to open up on their own all the time out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and I think it pinpoints a couple different things. One of the things being, and I don't want to speak out of place, and I don't want to...
No. I'm just playing with ideas is all.
I mean, I think that there's... In the paranormal world, my belief is that we are influenced by a lot of different disparate ideas and notions about what this all could mean. And,
sure, yeah.
Essentially sometimes our beliefs are grab bags. And, I think Peter, like, whether he would agree with it or not, I think it's true in that some of his ideas about the simulated universe and synchronicities being involved in providing signpost or insider information is not really too dissimilar from something like a non-dual Kabbalistic shaman would think.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Was he basing it then on Mayan belief and numerology? Is that where he was coming from?
He was coming from that. Yeah, he was obsessed with the idea of the Mayan calendar, for sure.
All right.
And the influence of these ancient traditions and these this knowledge from the secret school that essentially was picked up from ancient traditions, I think was really affecting his viewpoint.
Yeah.
These signs and symbols could really lead you to something else greater.
Have you been in touch with him recently?
I haven't. We had discussed about going and doing a follow-up.
Oh, that would be neat.
This year is perhaps another portal opening.
Ooh.
He believes that later this year, there's essentially his second shot of making this happen.
Oh, Jim, I hope you're in touch with him because I think a follow-up would be great on that.
I do too. It would be great to be up on the top of Bell Rock this time. Make it up to the top, right?
Take a plane this time or a helicopter.
Maybe a helicopter.
Yeah, maybe a helicopter.
Right.
Unfortunately, Jim, we're just about out of time.
Oh.
We only got about a minute left. It's been great having you. You want to give out your website or where people can find the podcast, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find pretty much all the information at euphomet.com. That's EUPHOM, as in money, EUP.com. You can also find that on essentially every single podcast platform. I encourage you to get it through Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review, which helps the show tremendously. And then for social media, you can find Euphomet at Euphomet essentially on every social platform, as well as at It's Jim Perry for my own personal stuff, which is updated more routinely.
Okay, and how did you come up with that name real quickly, Euphomet?
Just kind of made it up,
Just made it up.
It's like a euphemism for a Baphomet.
Okay.
Like a playful devil kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. well, Jim, it's been great having you on. Do you ever get up this way, New Hampshire way?
New Hampshire, Boston,
Been there before. Yeah, I've never been there before.
Never
I've been to Boston, but I need to come and visit you guys. I would love that.
I think you should think about that, seriously.
Absolutely. If you ever get up this way, by all means, get in touch.
Yeah, we'd love to meet you, and we can show you some neat places.
And we can put you in touch with some really interesting people, too.
That's right.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic. It's a date.
Wonderful.
Okay. All right, Jim. Get your plane ticket ready. And
Thank you so much, Jim, for being on. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jim. We definitely going to have to have you back again. I want to hear about this dining with a vampire.
Ooh. Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you sometime soon.
Okay. Have a good evening.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Cheers.
All right. Well, that was a great show.
Yes, very interesting. Always interesting.
Very interesting guest. And, hey, we're out of time.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening, and you all have a good, happy Halloween.
In this one of many